I used to think that wine was a rational purchase. When you buy a bottle of wine, you buy a glass of wine, it's memories. Winemaking is cooking. Anybody who tells you it isn't, it is.
This podcast is with Robert Joseph. His nearly 50-year career in wine spans everything from being a critic to a winemaker to a consultant. I shot this video on location at a hotel where I was staying while judging Mundus Vini, so you have to excuse me. There's a nearby train, there's people moving around in the background, there's other guests, so it might be a little bit noisy. I'm going to do my best to process the audio. Also, Robert wanted to let you know that the label's a little bit stained because while they were transporting wine from Georgia to Germany, some of the bottles broke. I hope you enjoy the podcast. I loved your article recently in Decanter when you talked about why the wine industry, why we haven't went to non-vintage wine and why we haven't made that acceptable. You want to touch on that? It's acceptable in champagne. Why can't it be acceptable in all wine?
Well, it is acceptable in Spain. We have this thing called Vega Sicilia, which a lot of people pay a lot of money for, and they're very happy with. As you said, in Champagne, we buy Krug, we pay a lot of money for Krug and so on. And for some reason, we say, oh no, with wine, it has to reflect the vintage. And it is lying. We are hypocrites, because when you buy a bottle of wine that says 2023 on it legally, in many places, most places, it has up to 15% and up to 25% in some places of wine from other vintages. That's totally legal and nobody says anything about it. So, by my calculation, that is nearly one glass out of every bottle that is not what it says on the label, and we think that's okay. I don't have a problem with it. I'm making wine in France. We refresh that wine every, we do 3 bottlings, 4 bottlings in a year. We will add some. So I'm actually taking advantage of that rule, but I would be very happy to actually tell people that this wine contains 3%, 5%, or whatever of a different vintage. But we're not doing that. As a industry, we're telling people it's 2023 or 2 or whatever, and allowing them to do 15% of other vintages, while saying, oh, if you wanted to say it's a blend of 22 and 23, that would be wrong.
It reminds me, I was in the Languedoc one time with one of my friends, who's a winemaker. I don't make wine, but I've been in the cellar long enough to see what goes on. And I remember him giving me a wine. I was just like, what vintage do you think this is? I was like, 16, 17, 18. He's like, you're right, 2016, 17, and 18.
But what was he going to put on the label?
I couldn't remember.
I bet you he was going to put one of those years on.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
I find it fascinating, wine people and writers, for instance, when you're in the cellar, people are writing down exactly what the winemaker is saying. And even when I'm tasting with consumers, like, oh, the 16 was a great vintage. I'm like, you guys don't know what happens in the cellar. So you're saying, why don't we just become more open with it, because it already exists, right?
And I think the Champagne people, as so often, are leading the way, because what we're seeing with Roederer, for example, Krug, what they're doing is, whether you put it on the back label or you put it online, so you find it with your QR code or however you find it, essentially you can find that information. And if you're a geek, you might want to know where the elements of the Krug came from, which vineyards it came from, or which vintages and so on. If you're not, it's a nice drink, you're happy. But to me, that is honest, and that's what we've done with my Georgian wine here. We are giving people the information of the grape varieties, where they came from, and the different vintages. And in fact, there'll be some vintages which are 95% one year, 5% another. There'll be other vintages which are actually probably 50% one year and 50% other years. It doesn't really matter.
Which happens. Us wine people get too obsessed over when the consumer really just says, I just want something good to drink at a good price, right?
I think there's something else to say, which I think is quite important. There are 2 lots of consumers out there. There are the ones who genuinely are fascinated by the difference in vintages and so on. And there are the ones who want the same experience as they had last time. That's like, if you like the 2 sorts of people, there are the completists, the people who've got every recording of an opera singer doing a particular performance, or Dylan, all the bootlegs of Dylan doing like a Rolling Stone or whatever. And look, isn't it different that he did this in 68 and this in 69? There are other people who just want a good recording of Dylan doing like a Rolling Stone. And that to me is where we are. But there's something I think that we need to be very aware of. Climate change. Climate change is making every year more different to the last one than it used to be. We have drought years now. we have cold years, we have floods, it is going to be more and more difficult for any winery anywhere in the world, from La Mancha through to the Medoc, to actually create the same wine effectively, or a similar wine, next year to this year to last year, because the climate's not allowing it. And to me, that leads us to say, isn't the logical thing to make at least some multi-vintage wine? I'm absolutely not saying get rid of vintages any more than Champagne got rid of vintages. I'm saying that when we have a spectacularly bad vintage like 2013 in Bordeaux, that actually that wine should never have got into a bottle with 2013 on the label. Those wines were not nice when they were released, and they didn't get any nicer. It was logical to blend that wine across other vintages and say, this is multi-vintage number 7 or number whatever.
Vegas Sicilia's been doing that with their Unico Reserva for...
The thing is, they were not pioneers. All they did was continue the old Spanish tradition. So everybody else, we all say, oh, wine is a wonderfully traditional product. No, wine in Spain used to do that all the time, and other people did it all the time. One of the reasons why we didn't do it in the past, and other places didn't do it, was we were trying to sell the wine as fast as we could.
Yeah.
So made the wine in the barrel, it's gone. The better years you kept, they became the vintages you cared about. And of course people added stuff from other years. Of course they did.
With Robert Joseph, who I've become friends with over the coming years, long career, started as a wine critic, writing.
Hundreds of years.
Making wine, consulting all over the world. We've been from the writing side to the making, to the selling side, to the consulting side. How is everything different?
I think the first thing is, my career is almost cut in half. The first half was as a wine critic, and I believed that if you made nice wine, you put a reasonably nice label on it, didn't even think about that too much, and you put a good price on it, it would sell. And it was like imagining the movies looked pretty much like what I could see, and there were these real buildings and real horses and real cowboys and real whatever. And then one day I stopped being a wine critic and started to become a wine producer, and it was like going behind the scenes or going to the movie set and realizing that actually some of these houses are just bits of plaster on stilts, and the star is quite small. And among the sort of things you learn is that if it costs you 100 million to make a movie, you spend 50 million get people to come and see it. And that's even if you're making Barbie or James Bond, where you could imagine that all you have to do is, hey, we've got a new James Bond movie, guys, or we've got a Barbie movie. You'd imagine that everybody who knows James Bond or Barbie will pile in. Even those movies, they have to spend a lot of money. What I'm talking about is that with wine, we have no money. So the spirits guys, the champagne guys,
yep,
they spend a lot of money on marketing. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the importance of the label. The fact that if you don't like my label, you're probably not going to buy my wine, however good it is. The third thing is the importance of where it's sold. So if you're in a restaurant and the sommelier is convincing, you'll pay $100 for a wine, and that same wine sitting on a shelf in a store at $30 or whatever will gather dust. And then if it's in the right store, in Manhattan, in a really swanky store, somebody's going to hand over a $50 for it and be very happy, and I move it around the corner into a liquor store, and at $20 it won't sell. So it's the same wine. And, part of my background is in running wine competitions, and I'm here with you, Mondesvini, and we're doing a blind competition and blind wine tasting. And I've done a ludicrous number of these. And all I will say is that the gold medal or the 95 points or whatever it is what I call one data point. And the data point will go along with the other data points like the label, the situation, the price, and so on. And you will put that in your mind and say, yeah, it's 95 points, but it costs $500. I'm not buying it. Or actually, it's 95 points. It's only $8. There's something wrong here. It's too cheap. It might be a great wine, but too cheap can be as bad as too expensive.
My first publisher, when I was writing, before I wrote, was in wine, he said, it's 10% content, 90% marketing. Yeah. I mean, he was a bit extreme, but in a way, it's kind of true.
I think the thing that I would say is, if you ask me how it's changed, I used to think that wine was a rational purchase because all of my tasting was as rational as I could make it. Blind tasting, take out all the distractions and so on, give it a rate, give it a mark, a score, and then you hope that people can go buy. I woke up and smelt the wine and realized that this is an irrational purchase. It's an emotional purchase. Clothes are an emotional purchase. Nobody actually goes into a clothes store and looks at a shirt or a t-shirt or a skirt or whatever it is and goes, is this a 95-point shirt? They go, do I like this shirt? Is my partner, is this going to help me get laid tonight? I probably shouldn't say that, but whatever
No,
it is.
you can definitely say that.
Basically, different people are buying the same shirt for different reasons. And one guy's going to wear the shirt to go home to his mother's birthday party, and the other person's going to buy a shirt because he's going to go out clubbing. Maybe not the same shirt, maybe it is. But my point is we need to think about wine in that way, rather than, oh, it's a blend of this and that, and this terroir, and these barrels, and it got these scores. That's part of the story.
Yeah.
But not, it's only part of it.
How actually people buy wine. You've written about this before. And I love the concept because you're quite real and quite brutal with it. Because I agree 100%. A lot of us in the wine world like to have these fantasies about what people should be buying.
I wrote a book called The Art of the Wine Label. So I spent some time, long time back, I spent a lot of time thinking about wine labels. And when I started my French wine brand, which is now 20 years ago, I knew I didn't have enough money to pay for good marketing and good packaging. We had no money to start with. So I made the label designer one of the partners. But it's a bit like saying, you know, the chef is a partner in a restaurant, but actually I could say, actually the designer, a restaurant needs really great design. If I can't afford great design for my restaurant, maybe I'll make the designer a partner of my restaurant. And not only will he give me a restaurant that's going to work for my customers, but when I need to redesign the restaurant, which I probably will in 5 years or 10 years' time, my partner is going to say, hey, that pink wall now would look a bit better if it was blue. And that's been true in this. So to me, everything to me comes from the label. This is doing all of the work. And my French wine, which I don't have here, Le Grand Noir, which you've seen,
Yeah, tasted,
is the opposite of this because it has a nice little black sheep on it, but it says Chardonnay or Cabernet or Sauvignon Blanc. And anybody going into a store will see it alongside the other Chardonnays or the Cabernets. And they won't necessarily think about it, whether it's French or not. It's got a French name, Le Grand Noir, but you've got Californian wines with French names.
Yeah.
That may or may not impinge on them. They like it, they don't like it. They'll see the price, $12 roughly or whatever. They buy it. And my hope in life, so one hope is they decided to buy it the first time. I've got a 92 points on the Chardonnay, so I'm quite happy that'll help sell it, but maybe I haven't on the Cabernet. But they bought it. Now I hope they take it home, they like it, they remember the name and the little sheep, they buy it again. This is the opposite. It's got a name on it that nobody can see. They can pronounce it, K'avshiri, just about. It's got another word on it in Georgian script, which is going to mean nothing. It's got a little picture on it that is church, a chapel at the end of a road. What does that mean? And then it doesn't have a vintage. It says Georgia, but it then says Assemblage 2023. What does Assemblage mean? It's impenetrable. So I honestly believe this wine in a standard wine shop will have a really hard time. I think this wine, take this wine as a human being to a party, and assuming, you know, he's quite shy or she's quite shy, they're not going to have a great time because they're not wearing clothes that anyone's going to say, hey, that's really interesting. So this wine from the outset, from the get-go, was intended to be a hand sell. It was intended for sommeliers, for people in wine shops to say, hey, you want something a bit different, a bit interesting, try this. Whereas my French wine turns up at the party and says, hey, this is me. I'm the Chardonnay. You want a Chardonnay? I'm me, or I'm a Cabernet, whatever. So I think it's quite interesting as somebody who's both making wine and talking about it. And I have a third wine, for example. Nobody ever talks about their failures. I'll talk about failure. I have a brand called Greener Planet.
I didn't know that.
Well, the reason you didn't know about it is it hasn't been as much of a success. And we created that as a brand for organic or sustainable. And people don't want to buy a wine called Greener Planet. I think it's a great brand for a cleaning liquid. I think it's a great brand maybe for olive oil. But for wine, it doesn't fit into the emotional moment of buying a bottle of wine. Greener Planet is saying, I'm green, I'm ecological, and whatever. That's not what's in my mind or somebody's mind when they're buying a bottle.
Why do people buy wine in general?
I think I'm just doing a book, by the way, you're the first person I'm telling in public about it. And it's in aid of Alzheimer's research. So please keep an eye out for it. And why am I doing a book to do with wine for Alzheimer's? Because Alzheimer's is about a loss of memory. And to me, a glass of wine, bottle of wine, is about buying memories. If I go and buy a ticket to a baseball game, a football game, whatever, game lasts an hour, two, whatever it is, that is a moment a memory that I hope is going to remain in my mind. I take my son to the game. It's a great game. It's a bad game. I go to a restaurant, have a meal. I go to a concert. And I'm going to go and see Taylor Swift. My daughter's just been to see Taylor Swift in London. That is a memory it cost her $300 or whatever. That's going to be in her mind until she's 80 years old. That to me is when you buy a bottle of wine, you buy a glass of wine, it's memories. That's one of the ways I'm looking at it. But my book, back to that, is I've got 33 different wine drinkers, and they're all buying wine for different reasons.
Ah, so it's an allegory.
So I've got Charlie the Chugger, and she will actually take a bottle of wine and she will drink it from the bottle before going out clubbing where she'll drink vodka. She's at one end. I've got Godfrey the Geek, who wants to know everything about this wine, and he's going to ask me about the clones and the soil and the oak barrels and whatever. I've got Curious Chris, who just wants to keep trying new things. So today he's going to drink a Uruguayan wine. Tomorrow he wants to drink a Swedish wine. He's my worst customer in many ways because he's my ultimate one-night stand.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
However, in that sense, I'm hoping, despite it's only been a one-night stand, I'm hoping he's going to tell everyone how wonderful the experience was. So maybe that's relevant. And I've got the guy, Larry, who wants to show off. So he needs the bottle to be expensive and so on.
And the funny thing is, a wine drinker, we fit into all of those personas at some time or another.
I think you're making a very good point. And there are some people, but I've also got Nervous Norman, for whom the whole thing is terrifying. And the whole being asked to choose a wine in a restaurant or anywhere else scares him. And I was in Sweden a few days ago, and I was in their Systembolaget Monopoly store. There were like 4,000 bottles of wine, and I know a bit about wine. And it's a jungle.
People that are in it like me, sometimes you go into some shops, like one of my friends I did a podcast with, his shop is amazing. 5,000 labels of French wine. I mean, he's the reference in Michigan, but my good, that's intimidating. Let's taste this wine, because I want to touch on that. So this is from Georgia country. I'll be at next week with you.
Yep.
Or next month, I'm sorry. You said it's going to be a hand sell. This is not going to do on the... Why the heck did you make the label like this then?
On the back label, it actually says, almost a haiku, it's not really a haiku, which says, each a journey, no two pathways are alike, wine a meeting point. That will either have resonance for you or it won't, but what it's saying is that wine is a convivial product. And the word K'avshiri in Georgian means coming together.
Okay.
So it's a coming together because the two of us have got this glass of wine, but it's also a coming together because my winemaking partner, the genius behind this in terms of the production of this, Vladimir Kublashvili, he's cool, young, and Georgian. I am fat, old, and British. So, that's that's a coming together of two countries, two languages, two cultures, and two ages. And so, secondly, I'm bringing together a whole range of different Georgian grapes.
I see Rekatsa, Vatsvani, Tsitska, Hakini, Sulikori, Chitvi, Alagote, Muscat, and Kisi.
Now that gets interesting because two of those grapes are the odd men out. One is Alagote, which is from Burgundy originally.
And Muscat.
And Muscat. And Muscat's 2%. So it's and we spent over and over and over many blends. The second thing is this comes from two different regions of Georgia, east and west. And thirdly, this comes from a range of different vintages, going from 23, which is, it says on the front Assemblage, back to 2017. So this is being put together just like Krug whiskey, like Krug champagne, or just like a very
Krug whiskey, that does sound good.
Or like a very good blended whiskey.
Yeah.
And I love single malt whiskey. I love Burgundy from a single grape and a single vineyard and a single year. But I also like blends. And so this is what you're talking about. Why do a blend? Because I wanted complexity I wanted various things to be going on. I wanted the finish to be interesting. And I hope from the minute you smell it, by the way, Georgia is not, if you want Sauvignon Blanc, if you want Chardonnay, Georgia is not your place.
Nope.
Right? Georgia is not about aromatic grapes. Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio is about as aromatic in style as Georgia gets. So this is made from a whole set of non-aromatic or very subtly aromatic grapes, each of which is bringing something to the party. And the fascinating thing about wine blending,
I think white wine blends are. I have a video that's like the greatest value for money, like great wine in the world, because it's just so under. Like I love Collio. This really reminds me kind of a Collio blend.
It's, to be honest, Northeast Italy is where I'm thinking about here. But I met a wonderful Swedish winemaker this week who worked with Ludovico Antinori on his reds in Tuscany and worked with Michel Rolland. And as she said, literally what Rolland understands, and I've learned when we've been doing this, 1%, 2%, tiny amounts of different grapes can have an extraordinary effect. And we all know it in the kitchen. We all know that just a little bit of salt, juice, a little bit of salt and salt. So that's where this comes from. And we're drinking it at pretty warm temperature.
I had a previous vintage of this. This vintage, I know it's a multi-vintage, but based like champagne, it's based on a vintage. I feel like you've made it more Georgian a little bit, a little bit more.
Richer. Now the interesting thing that you're leading me to say, this is the other thing that is the most maybe different. So I've told you there's a coming together of the two guys behind it. I've told you the two regions, I've told all the different grapes. We also have the techniques. Yeah. So what we have here is K'avshiri, the amphora.
Yep.
Around 17%. We also then have a certain amount of skin contact in stainless steel. So the same effect as the K'avshiri, but in stainless steel. We also have some oak.
Yes.
And stainless steel with no skin contact. So you've got 4 different techniques.
Which is what a lot of white wines, you make some in stainless steel, you do some mallow on some. This is, I like this because it's more Georgian, so to speak.
Yeah. Look, what I wanted to do from the beginning, you tasted the previous, not vintage, but Assemblage, trying to find the way, and it's a bit like the Super Tuscans in a way, which was, and the Super Tuscans get a lot of coming for a lot of criticism. I love them.
I do too.
But the thing about them is it's the point at which they're Italian. They're not trying to be Bordeaux. And to be, that to me is when you've got a blend of Sangiovese and
you have to add Sangiovese. That's
Sangiovese and Cabernet, or Sangiovese and Merlot, or even Syrah, but it tastes Italian. But also you've got those flavor references that are now here. So the story of the aligote in here is interesting because I lived in Burgundy. And aligote was the stuff that you blended with cassis. It wasn't stuff that you pay $300-400 for from Coche d'Ury or Leroy. It was basically acid white wine from Burgundy. And when we were blending this, and I can't tell you how many iterations we did this was 5 years between starting the project.
Before you even bottled it.
And bottling. We had COVID in the middle of all that, but over that period. And at one point we got quite a long way, but we're quite happy. And Vladimir, Lado, as I know him in Georgian, said, hey, can we try some aligote in there? And I went, why? He said, yeah, let's just try it. Okay. It's a bit like being a band member, you know, hey, let's try a bit of drums on this or whatever. And in it went, hey, this is good. Now, we're talking very small, 3, 4, 5%. Anyway, we then went on doing other blends, and we kept getting it better and better and better. And I said, okay, can we take the aligote out now? And let's see what it's like without the aligote. And out came the aligote, and the wine went, so the aligote, we always say the aligote fought its way into this wine. And it's actually, they're saying, I need to be here. And the wine is saying, yeah, we're very happy to have the aligote, which is the outsider. And the muscat is like, it's not even 2%, but the muscat just adds that little touch of perfume. And I do my French wine, which you've tasted, my GSM, my Grenache Syrah Mourvèdre from Languedoc, the Mourvèdre, which is like 5% there.
Adds the spice.
Just adds something, and you take it down to 3%, and it's not as good. You take it up to 7%. So to me, anybody who understands cooking will understand what we're doing here, which is how can we make something taste the best we can. Now, you may not like it, or you may like it. Everyone's going to have their own taste on it. But to me, I admire chefs and mixologists when I'm in a good cocktail bar and I'm with a person behind the bar, and they say, hey, what do you want as a cocktail? And what sort of cocktail do you like? And I start to say something, oh, you might like some of this, you might like some of that. And they'll make a cocktail they've never made before, quite possibly. And you go, hey, wow, this is good. And they understand those flavors.
They understand the concept.
And chefs are trying to, and a chef will say, actually, what would happen if we put a little bit of wasabi in here? What would happen if we did this? And you think, this is an Italian dish or a French dish. Why are you putting wasabi in it? Well, I'm not trying to make a French dish. I'm trying to make an interesting dish with a lot of French elements in it. Maybe just a touch of wasabi.
So you're actually talking about the process of making wine. That's winemaking. That's really, because you're making a consumer product.
Winemaking is cooking. Anybody who tells you it isn't, it is. The only difference is that your great Burgundy Pinot Noir from one vineyard or Chardonnay is a really good steak off the griddle. And some other wines are wines with a sauce that's been elaborated with various ingredients. But is your best meal of your life necessarily a great steak off the griddle? Is it maybe something with a great sauce? They're both valid.
Let's go back to the point about why people buy wine. First of all, lovely. I like this vintage better than the previous one.
Thank you.
A little more serious.
Assemblage.
Assemblage. You're right, because it says assemblage. What you talked about this too, and because I've been reading all your stuff.
You're a sad individual.
I am. I guess
I'll send you some stuff, instructions of how to improve your life.
Don't worry, I do plenty of fun stuff too. Yeah. But talk about experience of you were talking about the experience in memory. Yet,
when was that?
It was an article. Just now. But I was a little bit slow. I don't get the British humor all the time. That's so people were pushing so hard for direct sales. To me, I think it's lovely because you're going to get more margin, but it's not really that scalable. Look,
it's very clear that if I was only making 5,000 cases of wine, I would love to sell most of that directly to restaurants and individuals with a few cases going elsewhere. If I'm making 50,000, it's different. And if I'm making 100,000, 150,000, it's different. So direct selling, there are so many reasons for wanting to do at least some direct sales, because apart from anything else, everybody who buys your wine directly is more likely to become an ambassador for your wine. Those people are more likely to listen to your ongoing stories, and less perhaps when a critic suddenly decides that you were 95 points last time and you're only 93 points this time, they might say, actually, this wine's going to take longer to come around, or this is different, or that's different. So I really think that we do need more direct sales and more wine. And I also think that winemakers, and Bordeaux is the best example of this, worst example of this, winemakers need to spend more time, or winery owners spend more time talking to the people who drink their wine. So, and that's a really good reason for having direct sales, because then you'll hear people actually react to your wines. And just like you just said to me, oh, I prefer this assemblage of 23 to the 22. You as a producer need to hear that from people, because you may think it's better or not, or say it's less good. Because I'm just as interested in you saying, oh, this is a bit more acidic or a bit more that. Oh, okay, they didn't like it as much. And that, whether you're a restaurateur or a winemaker, you need to hear that. But direct sales can, unless you're small, can only be part of the picture.
Off topic. Is your watch a Le Grand Noir watch? Is that the same? This is the concept. I talk about this often. You talk about wine doesn't need more education. It needs more seducers.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that? I talk about this a lot.
Look, the worst person, I'm lucky in life that I haven't had to do any speed dating. My life could change, but as of now. But I'm fascinated in the whole psychological concept of speed dating, because you've got, I don't know, it's 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is. Now, I turn up and say, hello, I'm Robert Joseph. This is about me. This is where I went to school. This is, and I'll spend 2 minutes doing that. And then, hey, what about you? And you've only got a minute. Whoever my date is, and end. And my chancellor, she's disappeared by now.
Yeah.
Right? For me, and by the way, I've started out by saying I'm a vegetarian, or I like this, and she's gone, she likes eating meat, or vice versa. To me, the first thing you should be doing, as if you're in that speed dating thing, is, hi, what do you like?
Yeah. And
the moment she has told me that she's a vegetarian, or that she likes skiing, whatever, it's for me to say, well, actually, I'm a carnivore, but I don't, I have friends who are vegetarians, whatever. We have that kind of interchange. And That to me is not education. Is all about, I need to tell you about the soil. I need to tell you about the barrels. No, I want to know what you want to know. Do you want to know about the family that made this? Do you want to know about the place and the fact that it's got a great old church where this was happened and that happened? Or do you want to know about the clones? Everybody wants to know something different. But what I always say about wine education, I go to a dinner party and the person next to me says, what do you do? And I say, actually, I've tried this. I work for the tax office. And they don't really want to have much of a conversation. or actually, I'm a foot doctor. That doesn't happen. You say, I'm in wine. And they say, oh, really? And they really want to know more. And that's great. And we have a long conversation about wine and they ask me lots of questions. I've tried, if I say I'm a stuntman. Now, the problem is they don't usually believe me, so that's a bit of a problem. But essentially, if I were to be a credible stuntman, you could probably get away with it. They will want to know all about being a stuntman for the next hour or two. Tomorrow, will they go and buy a book or read up about stuntmen or anything else? No, they've had what they need.
They got exactly what they need from it.
And that's so what I always say about learning about wine is most people want to know about wine in the way that I want to get fit. I want to wake up tomorrow morning, get out of bed, looking at myself in the mirror saying, hey, wow, I've lost some weight and I've put on some good muscles. I don't want to have to go to the gym. I don't want to not eat. People don't want to be educated. And I go to a Napa winery and this person comes up to me with an educator badge on. I didn't sign up to go to school. I signed up to spend an hour or two having fun.
So I'm on a lot of food trips lately with and it's so funny. I was talking with one really educated woman, owned her own business. She liked wine. She obviously loved food. She's like, I live right next to Napa. I don't know anything about wine. Mm-hmm. And you can see in these tasting rooms, not Napa and everywhere, people spot. And it just, people's eyes just glaze over. They want, pour something in my glass that I'm going to like.
I think that I've just spent some time with some really great sommeliers. And the more time I spend with somms, the more I like the best of them. And the best somms are psychologists. I grew up in the restaurant business. And basically, we were joking about this. You see the same man comes into your restaurant on 4 different occasions, 4 or 5 different. He comes in with his business colleague. He comes in with his wife. He comes in with his daughter, and he comes in with his mistress. Those are 4 occasions, and he may well want 4 different bottles of wine and 4 different conversations. And if you're a really good somm, you can read the people, and you look in their eyes. You give them 2 or 3 suggestions. You see what, and you start to talk a little bit about the wine, about where it came from, whatever. And if the eyes slightly glaze over, you don't continue. But if there's a little spark that comes in, you go, would you like to know more about this? I'll tell you a bit more. That's what wine, entertainment, seduction to me is all about. Seduction is about actually gaining somebody's attention, maintaining the attention, and ultimately having that person want more of you. And that is what wine should do.
There's a great author in America, wrote a classic called 48 Laws of Power. His name's Robert Greene. He also wrote The Art of Seduction, very well-researched books. And especially in wine, they want to be all me, my family, the soil, blah, 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 blah. But how do you know the even person wants that? You got to pull them into that, right?
Yeah. So basically, I don't know how much of me or what part of me you want, but I want you, the wine customer, to want more of it.
Do you think wine influencers work then? Well,
Yeah.
Like I have a lot of wine influencer friends, Instagram friends, like attract.
You're an influencer, for goodness.
I guess so. Well, actually on YouTube, there's no negative connotation on it.
Look, the thing about it is that if you're an influencer, or look, Jancis Robinson is an influencer. Mm-hmm. She wouldn't see herself that way necessarily. She is. Oz Clarke, great friend of mine, is an influencer. All an influencer is somebody that the audience has some confidence in, liking for. And, you know, if I like Tom Cruise and Tom Cruise drives a BMW, then maybe that's going to make me want a BMW more than a Mercedes. But by the same token, if I see somebody who, you know, is an influencer on YouTube telling me that they like this skin cream rather than that skin cream, if I were in the market for skin cream, that's the way I might go.
It took me a long time, and I'm still not 100% there, because when you start out in wine, you probably remember that. Well, maybe you were always confident, but like when you're a young person in wine, you want to prove yourself.
Such a long time ago for me, really, I can't remember.
Amongst the old guard, you want to prove yourself, and it took me a long time actually. And a couple of years ago, I stopped writing, and I was like, you know what? I'm not a wine writer anymore. I'm a YouTuber.
I think the other thing is confidence. This is really important. Of all the things that we talk about in this whole clip, the confidence to say to somebody, actually, I'm not enjoying this. Now, I had a moment in Burgundy where I was quite young and I went to visit a grower and he gave me a sample from a barrel. He didn't smile at all, old Frenchman. And he said, what do you think of this? It's pretty nice, ordinary aligotes, it might be. Second wine. And I went, and I didn't know what to say because to me, it was oxidized. It was like sherry. And it was the latest vintage. And I was in his cellar and he's just given it to me. And what do I say? And I'm really, really nervous. And I said, well, was this typical? And he goes, why? What are you saying? It's not helping me at all. And I'm saying, well, actually, it just seems to me to be a little, I'm surprised because it's in the barrel, but you've given it to me, but it seems a little oxidized. And he said, wait, the grapes were oxidized on the vine. We had a real problem with disease and so on, and that's it. And then suddenly we became fast friends, and he gave me a tasting of, I think, 20 other barrels. And his thing, he admitted to me afterwards, every time somebody tastes the first wine, says, this is good, second wine, this is good. Sorry.
That happens to me all the time.
Second wine, he says, if they say this is good, and he's given them basically the vinegar, the whole process stops. He doesn't give them the third or fourth wine. So be honest. What I'm saying is, if you don't know about wine, you do know about wine, don't pretend to like it. Say what you don't like.
The key, if you want to get into Burgundy producers and get the good stuff, is tell them you don't like the wine. I'm joking.
This is, by the way, this is in the days where dinosaurs were wandering.
Let's taste the red, because I've never tasted the red before. Saperavi, Ojaleshi, Alexandru, Aladastori, a grape I love, Otskunori Sapere, Merlot, the foreigner, Ricazzatelli Mazzvani, so 2 white grapes.
Well noticed. So you can tell this guy knows what he's doing. So the first thing to say is the wine industry doesn't ask why or why not. It does what its father told it to do, or it does what the marketing people told it to do. Now, if you ask anybody who knows about wine, they will tell you you make white wine from white grapes, which have white flesh, and you make red wine from black grapes that have white flesh.
Yeah.
And the color comes from the skins. Except there are a handful of grapes in Europe called Alicante Boucher. They sit in Portugal a lot. And another is called Grenache Teinturier, which is pretty rare, but Grenache and these have black juice. And in Georgia, the #1 grape, black grape, red wine grape, Saperavi, has black juice. So you crush the grapes in your hand and you get red juice. So, okay. What I thought is, what about, Saperavi makes some really nice wines, but I've had quite a lot that taste a bit clumsy, that don't seem to have the finesse I want. I thought, why don't we actually co-ferment the black grapes with the white grapes? Now that is something that happens in one place. And this is are you a wine geek question? Are you a wine geek?
Well, it happens in a lot of places, but not reported or under the law.
Yeah, okay, but you're absolutely right. But technically, and it's probably exactly illegal, Côte Rôtie in the Rhône, the one place. Go to Hermitage down the road, go to Saint-Joseph, go to any others, it doesn't. It happens with Côte Rôtie, #1. And then it happens where it's Syrah and Viognier. The only other place it happens is Australia, where they're trying to copy Côte Rôtie, but nowhere else. And I'm thinking, why? What is it so magic about this one place that this could happen? Anyway, with Vladimir, my winemaking partner, we began to experiment. And so we took some black grapes and we started to ferment them with different white grapes. And we ended up with different texture, different finesse, different aromas, and I think an interesting wine. And then, of course, more different grapes, more different vintages.
I love the smell of this because people on the channel know, and I'm not just saying this because I would tell you the truth. Like, because actually, I didn't like the first vintage, the first assemblage I tasted as much.
Yep.
This, if a wine can go sour cherry on me, because I love Sangiovese, I'm sold. I'm all in. And that's, I can already smell, Saperavi's a pretty strong grape, but you probably smoothed out the tannins here.
And funnily enough, and you're a good taster, these wines are from Georgia. Nobody really knows what Georgian wines taste like necessarily, but I want them to be Georgian. I love Italian wine. So it's like in classical music, you have particular composers or jazz performers or whatever you like. They're in your head. So in jazz, Miles Davis might be somewhere in my head. Dave Brubeck might be somewhere in my head. In classical music, you might be some Mozart, or it might be. And to me, there's definitely what I love about Italian wine is at their best, the brightness, sometimes even a strand of bitterness, but very little, and not silky smooth.
No.
but not aggressive.
Yeah.
And so, to me, back to my point about seduction, I've never found, in my case, women, but whoever it is, but I've never found people who are just sweet, nice, and easy and say yes and whatever, very interesting to talk to. I like to argue with people. I like them to argue with me, but argue in a good way. And so what I want is a wine you have a conversation with.
Well, this is friendly, but yet you can have, I mean, honestly, I'm not joking. To me, like if I was scoring this, and we're going to talk about competitions in a second, because you've got a lot of experience. To me, if I was like scoring this in a competition, because it's my flavor profile, so I'm biased towards that. I'm in like 91 plus, 92 point. I mean, I think it's a wonderful wine.
Thank you. Look, basically, it's what we were able to do. A lot of work where, unlike maybe a neighbor who might have just taken his Saperavi vines, made some wine, and they might have made a 92-point wine as well. So that's, the points are points. But
no, it's the gospel.
But basically, what I want is people to like drinking it. And the most important thing to me is they want to drink another glass.
I like tasting all the benchmarks and stuff, but I want to drink friendly wines with the edge of seriousness when it comes to red.
That's basically exactly where we're coming from. And it's, this awful expression journey, but it is a journey. And each time you do it, you're moving forward. We'll make a rosé this year.
You started the International Wine Challenge. You were one of the founders. Now you're helping with Mundus Vini.
Yep.
First, I'm going to ask about wine competitions, but you were talking about scoring and you were talking about wine evaluation.
I think one of the things I'd say to anybody watching this is you learn wine appreciation, wine evaluation and stuff. One of the things they will tell you is look at the color and what you rate the color. We all waste quite a lot of time on the tasting sheets where most colors, to be honest, get 5 out of 5, 3 out of 3, whatever it is. And the old days, if the wine was cloudy, you mark it down, but these days with natural wines, you don't do that. It's not filtered and so on. So then there's the nose, and then you get a lot of points on how the wine smells. And I think that's important, but I also think that sometimes it's overdone. Because I've had some really, really good, some wonderful wines that actually don't smell that strongly. They're subtle. You like what you can smell, there's not that much of it. Then you taste it, and then you're looking for the balance. You're looking for whether it's got too much acidity, sweetness, hardness, tannins, whatever. And the fruit, you like it. What other layers is it making you think? Then, most importantly of all, to me, but this is a personal obsession, it's what's left.
That's the separate for me, the length.
So to me, I don't mind if I'm making a $12 wine, which is what I'm doing in France, or I'm making what this will be, which is like a $50 wine in Georgia. It has to leave me with a good feeling that I like, but I want some more. Where the moment it's hard, it's dry, or it's too acidic, or whatever, I think, get me something different.
Yeah.
And so that to me, and when I'm judging wine, I put probably more weight on the way the wine finishes than some other tasters who quite often put more weight on the way it smells. On the finishes, they don't necessarily care as much.
You can get fooled, especially by cheap wines up front, if you're not, because the finish to me is the mid palate and the finish is what's important.
But basically, you can cheat. Oak is a really good way to cheat.
Oh, yeah.
You put a little bit of oak in there, and the smell will be more seductive.
Is this done in Quavery, any of this?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And the same principle.
Amphora, Georgian amphora.
Amphora, stainless steel, and oak. As far as I'm concerned, there's no recipe, but what we got to was that blend.
We're here at Mundus Vini. We're here at a hotel. That's why you hear some noise. Wine competitions. I mean, you helped start the International Wine Challenge. You're working with Mundus Vini. You're helping out. You hear a lot of skepticism. I mean, I'm biased when I talk about, I like the evaluation process. I like competitions, not only the networking, the judging, the doing it, but wine competitions, are they valid? Can people trust them?
Sorry, I've done I must have International Wine Challenge from '84, and I took it to Vietnam, China, India, Russia. So of course I believe in it. I wouldn't do it otherwise. However, what I always say to people, it's one data point. So the label is a data point. The price is a data point. The place where you're drinking it is a data point. The same wine in a smart restaurant, you will react to very differently to picking up in a liquor store down the road. We're all influenced by all of those things. So the great thing about blind tastings is it takes all of those elements out and says, how good is it when you don't know? when you don't know where it came from, or maybe you do know where it came from, but what the cost is or who made it. So, you know, the moment I give you something and say, hey, here's some Chateau Latour, you are bound to be affected. If I say, hey, dinner tonight, I've got Brad Pitt coming, you're going to sit next to Brad Pitt, or you're going to sit next to Angelina Jolie. When that person sits down next to you, you're going to be different, react differently, behave differently to, here's my friend George, who happens to look like Brad Pitt, or Georgina, who looks like Angelina. So it's a very good way of saying, actually, is this, do I like it, do I not like it? Whether it's Brad Pitt or his lookalike, we will decide for ourselves. Then off comes the sleeve, and you say, oh, actually, that person I liked turned out to be Brad Pitt.
I've found that actually it really matters which the wines are tasting up against. So the quality of the competition, the quality of the wine set, which takes time to build up the name for the just like anything though, it takes, there's a long tail to everything. What are the struggles like when because you have the experience of, you know, starting a competition from scratch and helping other competitions grow in the beginning? Are they still credible as they're trying to build their name up?
Look, it depends. I think in the UK, we started very small. We went from 50 wines to 100 to 200. We were doubling every year. At some point, fortunately, for any mathematicians out there, eventually it stopped doubling, because otherwise we would have gone into the stratosphere. But we got about 12,000. Here we got to about 12, 13,000. You are always going to have a mixture of chances of people hoping to win a medal with an ordinary wine. And you're always going to have some top producers who are not going to enter their wine into a competition. That's inevitable. If I was making Chateau Latour, why would I put it into a wine competition? I can only lose, right? So, you know, we need to be very realistic about this. On the other hand, the wine industry is as broad as it is. And what that means is that there are people of various levels who actually want to see how their wines do compare, and having a medal on a wine. So I've just come back, as I was saying, from Sweden, where the monopoly system Bolaget stores. You've got 3,000-4,000 bottles of wine. You've got nothing to guide you through. And you see a medal sticker, you see a gold sticker, you see something. And that, you think, okay, well, I've got 4 different Chateauneuf du Papes. Maybe I'll buy the one with a sticker. It is exactly the same in its effect as a 94 point or 95 point or 91 point from you or from James Suckling or from The Spectator or whatever. The difference, though, is that, and you do this, you've done this every day at this competition, you're one of 5 people around a table. If this has got a score on it, it's a consensus.
Oh no, in my panel, I'm the final say. I'm joking.
He didn't say that. Basically, everybody who's there has a vote. And you, as the president of the table, you are supposed to be listening to them as they say, actually, I think this is a little acidic. One of them's going to say something, or one too acidic, and that is you're going to get some kind of a consensus. Whereas one critic, which is what I used to be, so I was simultaneously a critic giving scores and running a competition where the panels did not necessarily give the score that I get, and both are valid.
We'll probably do this again because we see each other often.
With pleasure.
Where can people find you? Is LinkedIn the best place?
LinkedIn, Robert E. Joseph at LinkedIn is great. Actually, also, I do some strange stuff on Instagram. Wine_thinker, you'll find me there. And yes, and these wines will be, because you've got viewers all over the world, they're just coming into the States. We have an importer in New York. Not yet, but it's just beginning.
No, retail approximately?
They will be around 50. These will be about 50. As I said, they were just beginning to move in there. And volumes will be very small. Look forward to continuing the conversation. And maybe next time we'll have the rosé to taste.
Awesome.